Hello, everyone. This week's readings were interesting to me because they made me think less about like specific acting techniques and more about the relationship between the teacher and the actor. As a teacher and director, I spend a lot of time telling students what I want them to do, but these chapters made me think more about how a teacher helps an actor discover things for themselves. I especially connected with the idea that teaching acting is not necessarily about giving students one specific formula that works every time. Instead, it seems to be about giving them tools, allowing them to experiment and help them discover what works for them. My first takeaway is on page 27, and it reads, people often see more about us than we see about ourselves. That's the very prediction of drama. The idea that a good teacher can see things in students that a student doesn't see yet in themselves. This quote stood out to me because I think that is one of the most important things about what a teacher can do. Sometimes students don't know what they are capable of. A lot of times they don't know what they're capable of, and they definitely don't always recognize their own strengths. I think this is especially true with acting because students can have a lot of insecurities about their voices, their bodies, their emotions, or whether they are actually good at acting. A teacher has the opportunity to see something in students before the student sees it in themselves. As a director, I have had students who were very hesitant to audition, and then they end up doing something that surprises even themselves. I think part of our job as teachers is creating opportunities for those discoveries to happen, rather than always telling students exactly who they are as actors. My next takeaway is on page 133, and it says, Strasberg was a great acting teacher who was willing to contradict himself, which is what made him such a great philosopher of theater. I found this idea really interesting because teachers often feel like they are supposed to have all the answers. We want to know what method is the right method and what technique will work for every student, but acting doesn't really work that way. What works for me or for one actor might not work for another actor, and what works for an actor in one role might not work for them in another role. I think that is something I have learned more and more as I direct. Sometimes I have to try something with an actor, realize it isn't working, and approach the problem completely differently. That doesn't necessarily mean that the first approach was wrong. It just means that a particular actor needs something different. I actually found that idea reassuring because teaching is often about experimenting and adjusting rather than having everything figured out before we walk into a room, because that's not realistic. And finally, my third takeaway is on page 186, and it reads, the imagination and the real are not fighting for the actor's attention. Rather, they create and allow both to exist simultaneously. I really like this idea because I think beginning actors sometimes believe that they have to completely disappear into the imaginary world that they're playing. But as it explains that the real world and the imaginary world can actually exist together. An actor can be aware of other actors, the audience, the space, and even something unexpected happening in the room, while at the same time still remaining inside the imaginary circumstance of the play. That changes the way I think about concentration as a teacher. Instead of telling a student, don't get distracted, maybe the better lesson is teaching them how to acknowledge something, allow their attention to move, and then continue. I think that is a much more realistic way of training actors because live theater is never in control. Always something could go wrong, always something does go wrong, little or big. A good actor needs to be able to respond to what is actually happening without losing the world of the play. So overall, both of these chapters made me think about teaching acting less as giving students a list of rules and more as teaching them how to make discoveries, Chapter 7 made me think about the responsibilities of a teacher that has to recognize things in students that the student may not recognize in themselves, while also understanding that there isn't one approach that will work for every actor. Chapter 12 made me think more about the actual skills we were trying to develop, especially concentration, imagination, and the ability to move between different stimuli. As a teacher and director, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that I don't necessarily need to create actors who all work the same way. I need to give them enough tools and enough confidence to discover how they work best. So with that, have a good day.